me see. Hello. Hello. Can anyone hear us?
I made it on the group. Oh, I see us.
Oh, we're live?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I
Okay.
see us on the group.
All right, come on in. Okay, because okay, good. Come on in. Come on in. Let me share it. Good evening. Good evening. Okay. One of the platforms didn't go, but that's okay because the devil is a liar. But good evening. Tune
So,
in. Tune in. Thank you. Come on in. Come share. Share the broadcast. Share, 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 share. Share this evening. Good evening. How's everyone doing? We're super excited for this month guest speaker dealing with Family Health 2020. A dear friend of mine, Shameka Jones, health and wellness.
hello.
Yes. And so we're going to get started in about 20, 30 seconds. Please share. Invite family and friends. You don't want to miss this. Okay? Please share because she's going to be dropping nuggets. All right. All right. Well, let's get started. My name is Candace Simpson. If this is your first time watching me, or this is on replay. My name is Candace Simpson. I am an author, speaker, coach. I empower women and families to break through barriers that's preventing them from changing the world around them. And one of the areas is dealing with restoring and repairing parent and child relationships or dealing with families in a whole. So if you have been following me since 2018, I have been bringing on guest speakers on my personal page, but also Mom Really page. Dear friend of the guest speaker tonight, she was also on last year teaching on prayer dealing with families. But this evening, I had the honor to introduce one of my good spiritual sister friends, Shameka Jones. She is a health and wellness coach, and she will be coming and talking to us about creating a healthy family with through emotional intelligence. And so I will allow her to introduce herself, explain a little bit about her company, and why we should have emotional intelligence through families. Balls in your court.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Candace, for giving me this opportunity to talk to your Mom Really tribe on a hot topic, I would say, in the business world. But I'm bringing it to your homes tonight. And it's emotional intelligence, also known as EQ. And we'll actually be discussing how it can be applied to your families to improve mental health, emotional health, social health, and spiritual health. Just to give you some background about myself, as Candace mentioned, I'm a health and wellness coach. I'm very passionate about wellness. Just to give you some background, I just started my own company last year, March of last year, called 360 Health Transformations LLC. And I do health and wellness coaching and consulting. And pretty much, I literally started the business on faith. So I was not, I'm still going through my health transformation journey. But as I was doing research, I'm a researcher. So I'm doing research, science, psychology, even the Bible, what it talks about, because there's some things in the Bible that talks about health. And I didn't find anything that spoke to everything is all about eating and exercising. But what I found is that health is deeper than what we eat and exercise, and it's a mindset. And
Yes.
sometimes when our mental health and our emotional health is down, and when I say mental health, it doesn't necessarily mean you're depressed. It doesn't necessarily mean you have a diagnosed mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolar. Some people have those. But when I say mental health, I'm not just talking about that. But those are things that can cause, because of the inability to manage stress, which impacts your mental and emotional health. Those things can cause your physical health to be disturbed. So basically, what I do in my business is I focus on 6 dimensions of health: physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, and financial. Because all of these areas of health are interconnected. And if one area is lacking, it can interfere with another area of health, just
Yeah.
as the example I've given you. So that's just a little bit about what I do in my coaching business. I want to start off by saying, did you want me to go right into it, Candace, or did you want to say anything else?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. So I just want to start off by saying this is a deep topic. And
Yes.
there's no way we can cover this topic in its entirety over this Facebook Live. My focus tonight will be to define emotional intelligence and discuss the 5 dimensions of emotional intelligence and how each of the dimensions can be applied to your marriage and your parenting and just in relationships in general. So, some of you may not know what emotional intelligence is. So, you might be asking, what is emotional intelligence? Well, a guy by the name of Daniel Goleman defines it as the ability to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions and emotions of others and that of groups. Now, Daniel Goleman made the concept emotional intelligence popular. He did so when he wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. Why does that matter? And why is it more important than IQ? But the actual founder of the term emotional intelligence a guy was founded by a guy named Wayne Payne. He actually introduced the term emotional intelligence back in 1985, um, suggesting different things that we're going to be talking about tonight. But there's all others. There's others that were kind of on the edge of what emotional intelligence is, mostly talking about social intelligence.
Yes.
And you can find information about it going back to the 1930s, just to give you a little background. What it talks about, because there's some things in the Bible. So, in essence, emotional intelligence is defined as our ability to identify, understand, utilize, and manage our emotions appropriately to communicate effectively, problem solve, reduce stress, and empathize with others. So, in our families, from the time we are born, our emotions are developed and built into our subconscious mind with our families in our homes and in our environments in our homes. So you're not just taught by your parents. Your emotions aren't developed just by what you're taught by your parents, but you also are taught by their behaviors. And in developing these emotions, you learn how to feel about yourself. Some people grow up in homes that are unfortunately not the environment that cultivates a child to have high self-esteem or self-worth. So that child grows up insecure and lacks belief in themselves and their abilities. So as we grow in our families, we also learn the reaction of our feelings, how people react to our feelings. Just to give you an example is, have you ever had noticed a baby just cry? They didn't have no reason for crying, but they knew that if they made that sound, they don't even got tears. They just making the sound of crying, but they don't have, nothing's wrong with them, but they just want their parents'
Yes.
reaction. So that is a baby developing their emotions and their understanding of how people react to that emotions. So that's just an example. Also, you develop an understanding on what choices you have and how you would react to something and what actions to take with the choices you have. In other words, you learn what is right and wrong, and you develop decision making abilities based on your right and wrong and what you've learned. And just to add, what you may think is right or wrong might not necessarily be right or wrong.
Oh, really? Ah, what?
So, what does emotional intelligence look like in our families and in our relationships? So, for marriages,
Mm.
couples with high emotional intelligence respect each other and have feelings of deep admiration toward each other. They are able to honor their partner and their needs and wishes and hold them in high regard or esteem. When communicating, they listen to understand, not to talk. They listen to understand and they empathize with their partner, even when they don't necessarily agree. But they respect their partner's feelings on the discussion at hand and they listen with. So basically, how many times you've been in a conversation with your spouse and you like you like double dutch, you ready to jump in, you're not listening to what they have to say. You like, okay, when is my turn to talk? That might be a sign that you need to work on your emotional intelligence. For parents, parents with high EQ are loving and more attentive to their children's emotions. And that's not to say that a parent that has low emotional intelligence don't love their children. This is just a description. And also, they're more attentive to their children's emotions and feelings. In
Mm.
other words, they don't have that thing that we grew up with. Do as I say, not what I do. Don't talk while grown-ups are talking. They don't have that mindset. They literally
Stay in the
listen to
child
their
place.
children. That's right. They don't have that mentality. And then in relationships, those with high emotional intelligence are aware of their emotions as well as others. So they're able to communicate effectively and they have self control over their emotions when something happens that triggers an emotion. So maybe someone you're talking to, they begin to heighten their voice, and you don't like the way that tone sound. You being emotional intelligent will control that thing that triggered you to feel some kind of way. Like, no, she didn't. You won't actually say that out your mouth. You'll control yourself and you'll calmly listen because you are emotionally intelligent. So you don't react on your emotions in that scenario. So this helps with conflicts and it helps you to be able to adapt to someone else's emotions. So yeah, sister girl may have come out of her mouth crazy and she may have gotten loud, but that loudness could be a sign of passion and it not necessarily meaning that she's talking out of you, or she could just be going through something. So a person with emotional intelligence has empathy, and we'll get into the dimensions, and empathy is actually one of the dimensions of um, emotional intelligence. So I'm going to pause here. I said a mouthful. Do we have anyone on the line that has any questions about anything that I spoke about so far?
Anyone? Let's go back to, can you elaborate a little bit more about the emotional intelligence as it relates to, yes, marriage, but my platform is dealing with parent and child relationships,
Mm-hmm.
family as well too. But can you talk about the importance, why it's important for parents to have empathy and begin listening to their children as their children, especially as they go into adolescent, that teenager or young adult stage?
Glad you asked that because one of the reasons why we have a high rate, a heartbreaking high rate of suicide and suicidal attempts by teenagers, is because they don't feel like nobody can understand them.
Mm-hmm.
They're going through this emotional roller coaster on the inside of them, and they don't know how to handle it because they themselves are not emotional intelligence. And this is why I'm so passionate about talking about emotional intelligence. I actually went through a training on emotional intelligence with my employer. Yes, I still work a full-time job. I got one foot in and one foot out. But When I took the course, I was like engaged, like, oh my God. Listen, I'm like, this needs to be taught in the church. This needs to be taught in families. Like, this is so big because how many times do you see people going off that don't have no self-control? We see it all the time on reality TV.
Oh yes.
With whole grown women can't control themselves. A person say one thing and they ready to fight. So that's a sign of lack of emotional intelligence. So in our children, for our children's parent having emotional intelligence for our children's sake, it's two things. One, one of the dimensions, and we'll get into it, of emotional intelligence is self-awareness.
Mm.
So, as a parent, if you have emotional intelligence, you are self-aware, and you are also aware of others'
Mm-hmm.
emotions. So I didn't even realize that there was no name for what I had already had in me. I already had emotional intelligence in me. Of course, I honed it because of things that were just happening in my life where I allowed to let me perceive things a certain way. But anyways, um, when you're looking at it from a parent standpoint, um, how you talk to your children is so important, especially today, because I don't know what to say. These children are different from us.
Oh
They
yes.
have access to way more than we have. They see way more than we see. They have more different experiences, and let's not mention social media. So
Mm-hmm.
they're exposed to so much, and a lot of the things that they're exposed to um, are not even they're not even able to digest it. It's just too much. So
Yes.
they're filtering all of this information inside, and that's why a lot of these children are becoming depressed. And then here you go, a parent that lacks emotional intelligence, and you're talking down on your child, and your name calling. Sometimes your child might make you upset, and you might call them stupid, and they already feel stupid, you know. So when you're emotional intelligence, you're careful about, maybe your child did something to make you upset, and you don't mean they're stupid. The thing that they did is stupid, but you're more mindful about how you use your words with them, and you don't allow whatever they do have you react in a certain way, and you're attentive to their emotions. So in your conversation with them, you're seeing their emotions. You understand something's happening on the inside of them, and then you can empathize with them, and you'll respond with questions to help build a conversation with them so you can get a better understanding of
Mm-hmm. Now, how
it. And
can? Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
How can, for those individuals that have teenagers, because with teenagers they tend to act out or rebel, and
Hmm.
but we both know, and everyone knows that. And if you can go back when you were a teenager, it's about self discovery and trying to get your own independence and identity. And
Hmm.
so, what will be some helpful tips per se to help parents, and especially with this self awareness? Because many times parents are so busy doing all this other stuff. Because if you watch my lives weeks ago, I gave a statistic that only 37 minutes a day a family spends together, and they
Wow.
why there's dysfunction in the home because we're doing everything else except family. So
Hmm.
what would be some tips for you to give someone about being self-aware or even attentive to their children or even their spouses?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've gotten away from a lot of the traditional things like sitting at the table and eating dinner. Though the dinner table used to be a very valuable time. It was a
Mhm.
time where the parents can get to know about what the child did in a day, what's on their mind. And also one of the things that we do in our family is we have, even with our all of our children's out of school now, we still have family meetings. Now we
Mhm.
don't have them as much as we used to,
Yeah.
but that's a really good way to see where your kids are and have a conversation with them. And the other thing is go into their world. It's nothing wrong with going into their world. That is a part of emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
Um, really getting an understanding and respecting a person's emotions and their perceptions. So, we might look at some of the things our kids say and do and listen to like that is crazy. But when we go into their world and we try to understand what they're experiencing and what their likes are and things of that nature, they're more open to us
Yeah.
and trust. Because even though we raised them all their lives, could you believe that our children could grow out of being able to trust us with certain
Mhm.
information
Yeah.
because they don't trust us to give us certain information because they're afraid that they'll be judged.
Mhm.
So you have to, and having a conversation with your child, when you actually exhibit or have emotional intelligence, I should say, you'll be attentive to when your child cut the conversation off. Like they might be in the room, but you'll know when they shut you off,
Yeah. When
when
just
your emotional intelligence, when they checked out. And then being an emotional intelligent parent, you'll be able to pick that conversation back and bring them back so you
Mhm.
can have a really good conversation. I mean, there's been time I got all boys, and there's been times, when they turn to teenagers, you'll be like, who child is this?
Yes.
This is not the child I raised.
Yes.
And I mean, some of the things my sons did, I'm like, I cannot believe this. Where did they get this from? But they go out into the world, they go to schools, they go to kids that ain't getting taught the same things that
Mhm.
they're getting taught. And in order for them to fit in and
Yeah.
be like, they do things that's just
Mhm.
crazy. But as parents, we don't always want to go off and go crazy because we're literally pushing them into the world. We're
Now,
pushing them away so they can find someone that can relate and understand.
now, Shameka, we know we've been rocking for years.
Yes.
Talk to me about the relationship with Christians,
Hmm.
parents, people in the church versus our teenagers, because a lot of Christian parents think they got to put on this perfection and they're
Mm-mm.
pushing their kids away. So talk
Right.
to me about that. Why is it important, especially because we are Christians? Why is it important to have emotional intelligence? Because there's a difference between being religious versus having a relationship with Christ, and how it ties in with parenting. Because we've seen it. We see a lot of kids, because as ourselves, our kids may do something, we're like, oh my God, what happened? We pray, we do this. But the reality of it is they're developing and learning how to make choices.
And just like we did, we had to mess up and make
Yeah.
choices and
So
learn the hard way.
how do you, what's the word? The religious folks, the
Hmm.
Christians that all of a
Yeah.
sudden they had a past, right? And they
Hmm.
they become this religious freak. And now the kids is like, what's going on? How do a parent balance being a Christian? Because more like it's having a relationship with Christ. But some people don't know that, right? And
Hmm.
so how do they balance that?
So I'm just going to rephrase what you're saying. So basically, how do you balance having a relationship with Christ and a relationship with your child? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because with Christian parenting, and we have seen many times in the church that most Christians are secretive. They don't want to
Hmm.
talk about some of the issues or problems that's
That
going on.
okay, so they don't want to talk about what they did back in the day, how they was running them streets. That's what you're saying.
that standpoint dealing with the teenagers, because
Yeah.
this, like you mentioned earlier, this day and age with our teenagers and young adults, we can't just keep throwing the Bible at them and this.
Mhm.
We have to meet them where they're at, like you said. And so how
Yeah.
can parents balance without feeling, oh, we're we're leaders in the church or this, and I can't say this, I can't talk about this, or they'll view us a certain way. That stigma of perfection and that
Right.
balance and judging their kids.
Well, we teach them. We teach them how to pray.
Mm-hmm.
We teach them how to be in the world, and we live the word. But we don't throw the Bible at them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's literally religious. One of the things that I always try to do, I just was so happy that my son, my middle son, who's 19, he'll be 20 this year. I told all of my sons that I will not force them into making taking God into their life.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be their decision. Now, when they were small, they had to go to church.
Yes.
We
Yes.
pray together as a family all the time. They have their own Bibles. We used to have Bible studies as a family. We don't do that. We probably should get back to that. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't force God on them. I just try to I try to be an example. So I try to have the fruits of the spirit. So I try to be um a representation, just like we should on in the world. In my home, I
Yeah.
try to be that representative of God in my home, not only outside, but it's more important in your home than it is on the outside, because that's where your ministry start in your household. So when you're um holy than now on the outside, and your kids, you come home cussing and acting all crazy, and your kids see that, then they're going to view all Christians like that, and they're not going to believe in this God that we serve. So we want to allow them to take in the Lord on their own, and just be a reflection of God and our parenting, and then loving them and caring for them and teaching them. And then at some point when they're older, they have to be adults, and you still can teach them. But me and my husband like to call it, we're now our son's coach.
Yes.
So we're not teaching them anymore, but we're coaching them, because we've been through some things. So there's some things that they can learn. So we'll coach them through life now as they're adults. But and definitely prayer. I can't that don't have nothing to do with emotional intelligence, but listen, prayer is so essential in the household. I can't express that enough. And I think people simplify prayer too much and make it not seem as powerful as it
Yes.
is. And one thing I can say for sure, there without a shadow of doubt, my sons have a belief in God because of prayer,
Mm-hmm.
because they seen me pray for things, and I told them that you better pray, and God answered
Mm-hmm.
and blew their mind. So they like, okay, I do believe in this God my mother served. I'm about to serve him too. So at the age of 19, well, Candace, your daughter, and Karan got baptized. Was that 5 years ago? My
Yep.
youngest, 5 years
Yep.
ago, and then my middle son just got baptized this month, and I'm waiting for my oldest, my
It's
25-year-old.
And so that's the thing, parents. We have to train our children, and especially
Mhm.
I like how you said, Shameka, especially with our teenagers as they're growing and they're young adults, coaching them, because we need to show them live the word. We need to show them and be transparent about issues. Like I had to apologize to my daughter the other day for I was overwhelmed with several things and I got loud and I went off on her because some of the things that she done. I shouldn't reacted to the
Mhm.
emotion, but I should have responded in the spirit and responded with the emotional intelligence. And so, but the difference is I recognized that and I was able to go to my daughter and apologize.
Mhm.
Amari, I'm sorry. Mommy shouldn't have yelled. However, this, right?
Right.
I'm constantly on a weekly basis, I'm apologizing because she may catch me at the wrong time, but you have to be mindful. But that transparency and that realness to show your kids, hey, we're going through things too, not just as Christians, but as people. And my daughter,
Right.
when she gets angry, and if you watch some of my live, I use the same example because it doesn't stop, because each week I'm apologizing for something, right? But
Right.
that transparency will show your kids, okay, mommy's not perfect, right?
Right.
But however, teaching her how to forgive and how to move on and how to
Mhm.
grow. Because that's one of the examples of what we're trying to teach our children, how to live.
Right.
Give the word, but also we're going to do things that we fall short of the glory. But however, we serve a God that's able to forgive us. So if we're able to
Right.
do that, because we're imperfect people, right? And so that is something honest, and that transparency, and recognize and be
Mhm.
honest of our shortcomings. And that ties into
Right.
emotional intelligence, being aware, self-awareness,
Right.
the empathy, active
Right.
listening to understand.
Right. Yep.
Mhm.
That's a really good example, actually. Um, just because you did react to your emotions in that moment, the fact that you realized that you reacted still means that you have emotional intelligence. Um, as you exercise emotional intelligence, and we have to be mindful, right? Be in the moment. A lot of times we're not in the moment with things, and that's how we get off track and we react to our emotions. So it's good to be conscious and in the moment. So when things happens, when triggers arise, we can have self-control when our emotions are
Yeah.
starting to be activated.
Okay.
All right. So I have some questions for you guys. And I want you to be honest about your responses. You don't have to put them in the chat if you don't want to, but I want you to think about them. The first question is, have you ever allowed yourself to get worked up about something and regretted yelling at your husband, child, or relative, or friend, or someone? Second question is, have you ever made a rude or snarky comment to someone about someone? So you talking about somebody behind their back.
Oh, awesome.
They
Look,
right there. Look at that girl. Yeah. Third question. Have you had a heated argument with your partner only to cool down later and wonder why you ever let that small issue you were having get blown out of proportion into something huge? And then lastly, have you ever made a rash decision while mad, afraid, upset, only to regret it later? I think at one point in my life, I've done every one of these things.
yeah,
And these are all real issues. These are all real
yeah,
scenarios. And in those moments, those are times where you lacked emotional intelligence in those
yeah.
scenarios. So if you answered yes to one or more, I'm glad you're here tonight. I'm glad you're listening in tonight. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you become more emotionally intelligent. So now, as I mentioned, talked about emotional intelligence and everything, I'm going to actually get into the 5 dimensions of
Okay.
emotional intelligence. So there are 5 dimensions of emotional intelligence, and they are self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and social skills.
And can you repeat those again? Go a little slower, so if
Yep.
people take notes.
Self-awareness,
Mhm.
empathy.
And I encourage you guys write it down in the group chat so
And
people
what
get.
I'm going to do for your group is when we're done, a lot of
Okay.
this information that we're talking about, I'm going to create a document and I'll send it to you and you could upload it to your group.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
it
Thank
actually have an activity at the end as well so that they can ask some questions,
you.
answer
Okay.
some questions just to get their emotional intelligence built.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So
So
again, that was
self-awareness.
emotional self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and social skills.
Okay.
So each of these dimensions of emotional intelligence help you deal with people successfully in this form. In this forum, we're talking about family. So it would help you deal with your family members and your friends and those who are close to you.
Yeah.
If you have emotional intelligence, you are aware of your emotions and feelings and control them. And you can also, guess what? Control the emotions of others. How
Yeah.
many of you ever been in a situation where someone was just going off on you? I worked in customer service, and you got to have some good emotional intelligence in order to work in customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And someone might have been going off crazy, all upset, yelling, on fire, and you just remain, I understand. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You kept your cool, even though you might have been burning up inside, like, no,
Yeah.
they didn't. But
Yeah.
you're like, okay. So in that moment, what you did is you're not reacting to their emotion. So
Yes.
guess what ended up happening? They're going to calm down.
Yes.
They're going
Yes.
to
Yes.
bring their tone down. They're going to start talking like a human being instead of barking at you.
Yes.
And then you have at that point control that person's emotions. So yes, you can also control others' emotions if you have emotional intelligence. So
Mm.
we'll discuss what that looks like in a moment when we're discussing
Yes.
the dimensions. So there are personal and social characteristics of behavior that represent EQ, and I'll be using EQ and emotional intelligence interchangeably. EQ is stands for emotional quotient. Pretty
Mm.
much, it means emotional intelligence. A lot of times in the business world, you'll hear EQ versus IQ, which is
Yes.
intelligent quotient. So, some of the characteristics of behavior is people with strong EQ proactively build their EQ skills. So they participate in self development. So they read
Mm-hmm.
books and they go to webinars and they attend different things so that they can better
Yes.
themselves. They develop themselves. People with high emotional intelligence also manage tough moments better. They have self control, just as I give you that scenario. They're more successful on their jobs and careers because they're able to manage people better. They have better
Yes.
communication skills. So, therefore, they're thriving in their jobs and in their careers.
Yes.
They're better parents, they're
Mm.
better friends, and guess what? They're actually more successful in life. So the five dimensions again is self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and social skills. Each of these dimensions of emotional intelligence help you deal with people successfully. Those with emotional intelligence are aware of emotions and feelings and can control them and others, as I said. There are, I'm going to go right into each one
Okay.
of them and describe them. So, self awareness. Self awareness is awareness and knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, moods, emotions, and desires, and the effective effect they have on others.
Mm-hmm.
An awareness of one's own personality or individuality. If you're highly self aware, you can objectively evaluate yourself, manage your emotions, align your behavior with your values, and understand correctly how others perceive you. So, when you're self aware, you have emotional awareness. You
Mm.
understand what causes your emotions to flare up. You know what triggers you to get emotional. Um, you have a self-assessment. So in one of my programs, we do a SWOT analysis. And in a SWOT analysis, we look at our strengths, our weaknesses, opportunities, and even threats um, in our lives.
Yeah.
So in becoming self-aware, you're assessing yourself, you're assessing your belief system, your values, how you perceive things, your moods, like what makes you get moody, your feelings, your character, all of those things. And their self-awareness is another thing about self-awareness is your self-confidence.
Mm.
The Bible says, let us examine ourselves in Lamentations 3:40. So even the word talks about self-awareness. It talks about us examining ourselves. In order for us to be better, we have to know, we got to know who we are and those things that we need to work on.
Yes.
And speaking of which, I'm actually I have a group called 360 Health Movement on Facebook, and we're actually starting a challenge called Know Yourself. And
Hmm.
basically, what that challenge is all about is self-awareness. So I'll be happy for you to join the group and join us in this challenge.
Is it
I'm
for women
very
or men? Is
sorry.
it is it for women or men?
It's for women. That's right. You got a man and woman audience. It's for women.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks for bringing that up.
360 Health Movement Group, right?
Oh, yep. 360 Health Movement.
And we'll make sure that we post her group information after the live is over.
Okay. And then the next dimension is self regulation, which is the ability to control or redirect distracting impulses and moods, and the tendency to defer judgment and to think about things before reacting. Behaviorally, self regulation is the ability to act in your long term best interest. You heard that? I'm going to repeat that. It is the ability to act in your long term best interest. What that means is you're you're having control over yourself because you don't want the consequences if you make that reaction to
Oh,
that
that's good.
emotion.
That's good.
So, and then consistent with your deepest values. So, uh, one of the things that um, so, self-aware people and emotional intelligent people that they have deep values and they stand by them. So, in order for them to be consistent with their values and their beliefs, they have self-control. Emotionally, self-regulation is the ability to calm yourself down when you're upset and cheer yourself up when you're down.
So time out. Take a time
Yeah,
out. Put on
yeah.
music
I
or something.
literally talk to myself. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of people would never know what I'm going through. I could be, me and my husband could have had a fuss out before I went to work, and I go in their office like, "Good morning." And I'm all upset on the inside. Give them that energy, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's what it's about. It's about, not because we are energy beings. It's
Yes.
not giving that negative emotion to somebody else. Because that person that was talking with the loud voice and that was out of control, if you weren't emotional intelligent, that could have been contagious, right? That negative vibe and that tone could have fell on you if you had not been emotional intelligence, and
Yes.
y'all in a full out
Yes.
argument or even fight
Yes.
in some cases.
Yeah.
So we have to have self-control. And I got another scripture for you. Proverbs 29:11 says, fools vent their
Mhm.
anger, but the wise quietly hold it back. So when you have self-regulation, you have self-control. You also have adaptability. And what that means is you're able to adapt to situations.
Mm.
So maybe you don't agree with someone saying, but you're able to adapt for the sake of that person and understanding them, even though you
Yes.
might not agree with how they're acting, what they're saying. But in order to keep the peace, you've adapted to the situation. Jesus adapted all the time
Yes, he did.
to mankind. So that is a characteristic of our Lord and Savior. Lastly, self-regulation. You are achievement oriented. So you're actually goal oriented. You're more more motivated to make create goals and finish them,
Mhm.
which leads us to um, the next dimension, which is motivation. Motivation is the desire to take action to achieve a goal. Work motivation is a desire that goes beyond the money and status. So, money is a temporary motivator. How many of you know that? Like some of you might be on the grind for whatever. Okay, I got to get this paper, but that's a temporary motivator. You got to have something bigger than money to keep you
Yes.
going. Also, status, a title, those are temporary motivators. So you got to have something bigger than that. Motivation is an inner vision of something important to a person or in one's life, or it's feeling of joy in an accomplishment, the eagerness in learning something new, or just a feeling that one person may have when occupied by a project. Motivation is the word motivation is derived from the word motive, which
Mm.
means needs, desires, wants, or drives within individuals. I don't know why I keep getting tongue tied. It is the process of stimulating people to actions to accomplish their goals. So,
Yes.
in other words, emotionally intelligent people are motivated people. Um,
Mm.
they're goal oriented. They're go getters,
Mhm.
and they are focused. So when you get to a place of emotional intelligence, what that means is, okay, you have this goal, and a goal could be your standard in life.
Mm.
This is my standard in life. This is who I am. These are my values. No matter what you do, I'm not crossing the boundaries of this standard. So you can get crazy, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to stick to that because I'm sticking to my values, my belief systems, and who I am, my characteristics. So it doesn't necessarily mean a goal per se, you're trying to achieve. It could just be your standard that you set for yourself. That
Yes.
you're motivated to stick to that standard no matter what comes your way. Um, and the fourth dimension of emotional intelligence is empathy, the understanding. And a lot of people use empathy and sympathy interchangeably, and they're not the same. Empathy is the understanding of a person's emotional makeup and treating the person in accordance to their emotional reaction. Empathy is not sympathy. When one has sympathy, they put their self in that person's shoes and they feel what they're feeling. When you have sympathy, you're literally feeling that emotion that they're feeling. But when you
Mhm.
have empathy, you empathize with the person. You understand their emotional need, you acknowledge their feelings, and you modify your response based on that understanding. So
You
you're
see,
not necessarily putting
that's good.
yourself in their shoes and feeling the hurt, the pain that
Mhm.
they're feeling, but you understand this person's hurt. I'm not
Mhm.
going to react to how what they've done because they are a hurt person. So
Mm.
you empathize with them.
That's good. That's good, sis.
So empathy characteristics are self-oriented, developing others. So most that can mean mentoring and coaching, and understanding of others. So the last dimension of emotional intelligence is social skills, which is also considered relationship management. And that is the ability to find similarities in experiences, in opinions, or in interests in order to build rapport and communicate your perception, awareness, and knowledge of their own character, feelings, motives, moods, emotions, and desires, and the effect in an effective way for others. So I'm going to say that again. It's the ability to find similarities in experiences. So I've been stepping out. I like to keep a close knit people, and I've been this year just stepping out of my comfort zone, and meeting more people. And I went to this health and wellness expo, and although I knew people that were going to be there, I went alone. And I just sat at tables with strangers and I talked, and um, I listened to them, and then I in conversated tried to find similarities and turns to keep the conversation going. Um, Even like if I'm talking to somebody, someone might state their opinion. You don't always have to have a remark or response to someone's opinion. You can just,
Yeah.
okay, you know, and you try to find interest to build rapport. So basically, that's why it's good in relationships, because those are things that you need in order to build real friendships. You gotta, most people that are friends, they have similarities. They have something in common. Most people that are real friends, they respect each other's opinions. Yeah, they don't always necessarily agree with what their friends' opinions are, but they respect them. They don't judge them. They respect that is their opinion, right? Also, they may have some of the similar interests, so that they have things in common where they can communicate. And they also have an understanding of their friends' emotions, and that's how you build up um, your social skills when you do those things. So that's the other part of emotional intelligence. And in the household, um, as far as social skills is concerned, okay, a lot of times I hear this out of adults, that this generation or the kids these days, right?
Yeah.
And that separates us from the kids when we say that.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying like they're different. So why you think our kids are going into social media and finding people that's um, totally outside of what you will want them to hang around, because they're looking for people that they can have similar experiences with. They're looking for people that's not going to judge their opinion. They're looking for people that may have some shared interests. Now, they might not always have um, the best, they're probably not always the best interest, but they have some shared interest. It could
Yes.
be something as simple as rap. I have one of my sons, well, actually, two of my sons that rap. So, normally people in the arts and music, they hang around crowds in arts and in music.
Mm-hmm.
So not necessarily everyone in that arena might be good for them, right?
Yes.
So going back to what I said at the beginning, we have to go into their world. So some of the characteristics of social skills is communication. So you're able to effectively communicate. You're communicating with empathy. You're communicating for understanding instead of trying to get your point across. Another
Mm.
characteristic is collaboration.
Mm.
And the last characteristic is you're able to manage conflict. You have good conflict management skills.
Mm.
So I'm going to pause right there before I go dig deep into each of the dimensions. I said a lot there. Is anyone online have any questions, comments?
Looking to see, but so far it is good, sis. Like what you're teaching on is really needed in the
Yeah.
home.
You see what I'm saying?
It's,
Yeah.
it puts everything in perspective, you know, with our day and age dealing with our families. Like we have to go back to the basics. We have to go
Right.
back, like you mentioned, going back to some of those traditional things, not religious, but some of those things that worked. Dinner time,
Mhm.
family time,
Right.
trying to understand and empathize, and get into our children, our spouses' world to understand, because that's where we can begin praying effectively if something's off.
Right.
We have to have effective communication with our loved ones and our family to understand what is their thought process, what is going on. Because we
Hmm.
can't really pray effectively if we don't know what's going on with them.
Right.
But we have to create an atmosphere that's conducive for healthy communication, but also conducive for emotional intelligence, where we are maturing. And see, and we're not sitting here on this live saying we had it all together, or we
Mm-mm.
had
Not
it
at all.
all. There's growing moments. Our children grows, and we should still continue to grow and mature in areas that we know to bring unity in the household, right?
Hmm.
We have to create an atmosphere, especially Christians. God is bringing back families like never before. He wants to bring healing. He wants the power and authority to operate in the home first. Many
Hmm.
a time we've been operating in the career and all of those things, and we wonder why our family is not unified, because the
Yeah.
enemy began to cause lies and deception and cause busyness and all of that. But God is bringing it back like never
Yeah.
before. He will cause situations to happen to shift the family so they don't have no choice but to come together as one, right?
Yes.
So this emotional intelligence is very key in this hour, and especially for 2020 and for the next 10 years. We have
Yes.
to receive the things that God has for us. We have to be in a position to get into a place of unity within our homes. We have
Hmm.
to deal with unresolved issues. We have to deal with secrets. We have to deal with the dysfunction in our families to receive all what God has.
Hmm.
We level. Our household is not on one accord. And it starts with one of these things she's talking, emotional intelligence. We have to self-aware, self-examine self. We have to be aware. What are some of the breaches that's causing problems in our home? Family Help 2020. We have to be in a position to get healthy.
That's
Get
right.
healthy.
Get
Go ahead.
healthy.
Before I get started, girl. Go ahead.
All right. Look, you about to start preaching. Don't let her hands start going. It's a wrap.
Go ahead, sis. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to get into self-awareness and talk about our body's response to stress.
Oh, that's a good one.
So our bodies are complex, as you know, and we have this natural alarm system that is alert for potential attacks to our body. When we are threatened, our
Mm.
body's alarm system can sometimes respond irrationally
Mm.
as a rush of stress hormones flood our body through the prefrontal lobes. Our adaptable decision making functioning part of our brain
Yes.
can meditate, it can mediate this reaction. So when our body senses danger, a small mechanism in our brain prepares the body to literally fight the danger or to outrun it.
Mm.
This is called the amygdala. It's like a walnut sized um, membrane mechanism in our brain. Um, and it's the emotional part of our brain,
Yes.
which regulates the fight or flight response. When threatened, we can respond irrationally. The amygdala, I'm going to talk about something called the amygdala hijacked. And this was actually coined by Daniel Goleman, the gentleman I talked about who wrote the
Mm.
book Intelligent Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can't Matter More Than IQ. So he uses this term to describe emotional responses from people which are abrupt and devastating and out of measure
Mm.
with the actual stimulus because it's triggered and it's an emotional threat. So the amygdala hijack exhibits three signs: strong emotional reaction,
Mm.
sudden onset, and a post episode realization if the reaction was inappropriate. So the logical part of the brain shuts down as all of our biological resources are funneled towards survival. We all are susceptible to amygdala hijack and have a pattern of fight or flight. So the fight responses can include criticizing someone,
Mhm.
personality, or character, any form of disrespect, the use of sarcasm or shame. So, how many of you know someone because something going on with them, and somebody might have said something that hurt their feelings? They got emotional about it. So, in retaliation, they say something shameful. They
Mhm.
reveal something about that person to shame them, right? um,
Yes.
or they insult them.
Yes.
Nonverbal behaviors is eye rolling and scornful looks. Those are also fight responses. Flight responses can include withdrawal, stop participating. So just you could be in a group and your flight response could be just to like you don't even want to be a part of it no more.
Yes.
Changing the subject is also a flight response. So you're in a heated conversation and you can't take it no more. So your flight response kicks in and you just like, I'm changing the subject. You moving on to something because you can't in that moment take that discussion. Another flight response is rejecting someone.
Mm.
And me personally, in my life, I've dealt with rejection, and Candace, you know that because I've shared things with you.
Mhm.
And that is a big thing,
Yes.
especially in the household with family.
Yes.
There's actually generational curses of rejection, right?
Mhm.
Where the grandmother or grandfather rejected the daughter or the son, and now that mother's rejecting her daughter, or that father's rejecting his son, and it's going on and on.
Yes.
Somebody got to stop it. Somebody got to get emotional intelligent and
Yes.
realize what's going on. Another flight response is not speaking to someone, disconnecting. And
Mhm.
lastly, defensiveness, counter arguments,
Yes.
disagreements, blaming and accusing.
That's good.
So that's talking about, how our body responds to stress and stressful situations. And that and if you're self-aware, you're able to understand when your body's going into that amygdala hijack, right?
Mhm.
You feel what's going on. When your emotions, depending on what emotion it is, but if it's the negative emotion, which normally that's what we're talking about, when it comes to things like this, um, you're sometimes you can sweat. That's a sign. That's something's going on. Sometimes you can shake. You so mad, you shaking.
Yes.
So when you're feeling that, you have to, as a self-aware person, you have to create something to help calm you down in that moment. So if it's walking away, and we're going to get into some things you can do. You walk away. If it's taking a deep breath, counting to 20 and taking
Yes.
another deep breath. That's a technique that can calm you down so you're not responding, because as I said, when that amygdala hijack occurs, you're no longer thinking right. You're irrational. So
Yes.
you don't want to make an irrational decision. You don't want to have irrational reaction. You don't want to go into fight or flight response.
Yes.
So then let's get into self-regulation, which will talk about how we can actually address when that fight and flight response happens. And I'm going to talk about what's called the stop method. And I'm going to talk slowly so you can write this down. But again, I'm going to be sending this to you anyway.
Okay.
So the stop method, the abbreviation stands for S, stands for stop what you're doing. So in that moment, when whatever's going on, that emotions arising, you're in that irrational place, you're going to stop what you're doing. T stands for take a deep breath. You're going to do this as many times as you need to until you calm down. This is very important because how many kids are abused by parents
Mm.
because they didn't have that moment where they walked away when they were enraged. That
Yeah.
amygdala hijack took over and they
Yes.
did irrationally beat the hell out of their child.
Yeah.
And it's not funny, but that's what happens.
It's true.
So take a deep breath. Or two adults, you having a conversation and they're getting all hot and they didn't stop in that moment. They didn't take
Yeah.
that deep breath, and next thing you know, they fighting with their grown selves.
Yeah.
And O stands for observe and be mindful of your surroundings, your emotions, your feelings, and your thoughts. And when you're observing, what you want to do is you want to acknowledge that emotion and you want to acknowledge that feeling and you want to start being mindful of those thoughts because we're in our irrational state, right? So your thoughts might not be rational when you're in that irrational state. So you want to observe your thoughts and then you want to question those thoughts. Well, is
Mm.
that true? Is this a true feeling? Is this really what's going on? Like whatever that question is, because we do a lot of internal conversation, right?
Yes.
So you want to question those thoughts. Like some you might be in your mind saying, she thinks she better than me. But then you want to say and you want to have that inward conversation. Well, do she really? You know, you want to have that inward conversation. You want to be mindful of your emotions because in that moment, then you have the power to
Yeah.
turn it around. You have the
Right.
power to get out of that state and
Yes.
change things around and become positive. And then lastly, P stands for proceed with appropriate response. If your stress level is high, perhaps you need to take a break to cool down even more. Maybe
Yes.
you need to take a walk to gather yourself. It's important to know your triggers so you can effectively respond without an emotional response.
Yes.
What you can do is calm down and face that situation maybe another hour or maybe even another day. Maybe today is not the day for you to um, get in that conversation. So you want to stop what you're doing, stop the conversation. You want to take a deep breath, and in the family and going back to the household and in
Yeah.
relationships. Um, you might be having a conversation. What I see the enemy doing these days is he's trying to break up families, right? So causing all kind of conflicts and misunderstandings and offenses in families. So sometimes you'll find yourself in full out beef with your family member, with your loved one, right? And really, 9 times out of 10, how you're thinking ain't right and how that person's thinking is right. And a lot of times people be mad at each other for so long, they don't even remember the root. They don't even remember the real root of why they mad, but they just steady trying to be mad, right? So it's really important to apply the stop method so you're able to have good that's a conflict management tool there, applying the stop method. And you're able to keep your relationships thriving and not tearing apart your relationships. The same thing with your child may have done something so crazy that you want to just go upside their head, but you need to think about you're in a rational state.
Yeah.
Stop what you're doing, take a deep breath, observe your thoughts, your surroundings, your emotions, your feelings, and then proceed with that rational, appropriate response.
Yes. Ooh, that's on a daily basis,
Yes.
especially
And
with
see,
kids.
you see how this is good for families, but this is good for life. And that's the
Yeah.
reason why people with high emotional intelligence are more successful in life
Mhm.
because they're not allowing things that normally stagnate people with low emotional intelligence to get in their way and thriving in life.
Yes.
Um, and a lot of times, those things that get in the way end up causing a problems with our mental health because we're stressed, and that stress turns into depression, and then
Yes.
we create anxieties. And as I'm going through this, I hope you guys can connect how this helps your mental health, how this helps your emotional health. I hope that you're making those connections. Let's talk about the spiritual health. I just talked about how it helps your social health. Let's talk about the spiritual health. Well, in order for you to truly live out, so spiritual health, people think it's just about the relationship with God. It is partly.
Mhm.
Um, because we can't be who we are created to be without aligning to God, because He knows us. He
Yes.
knows what's in us. We don't know ourselves fully. And that's why I'm doing this Know Yourself challenge. It's about getting to know, what we talked about, our triggers, our emotions, our thoughts, things of that nature, but also aligning to God.
Yes.
Aligning to God because there's a reason why we're here.
Yes.
We're not just here to live, we have a purpose.
Yes.
And in order to truly live out the purpose that God has called over our lives, we have to be self-aware. And that's how spiritual health gets into it, because spiritual health is one, our relationship with God, and two, purpose. That's what spiritual health is all about, our relationship with God, aligning to Him in our purpose, living out our purpose. So now let's talk about motivation. So motivation is an internal and external factors that stimulate desire and energy in people to continually be interested and committed to their jobs, their roles, their different subjects, and make an effort to attain the goal.
Yes.
I've already talked about where the root of motivation is, that it means motive. It comes from motive. But it also is from the Latin word monere, which means to move. So when you're motivated, you're moving. So our motives gives us our aims in our drive to achieve them. So again, when you're motivated, you're moving. You're moving forward, not backwards. You're not looking in that rear view. You're moving forward. So self-motivation involves motivating yourself and others to act. You must start by first being clear on your goals. So you got to be honest with yourself, and you got to be solid on what your goals are and what you want to achieve. It does not have to be huge, life-changing goals either. You must have a desire to achieve it, whether it is for your health, a relationship, your career, or life goals. You just need to be clear on what it means to you and the objective. And having a meaningful desire, you will focus on the benefits of achievement of the goals rather than the challenges that may arise when you're motivated. So, yeah, things might come up. We are going to have problems. Things are not going to go as planned.
Mhm.
Um, Life happens, right? But when you're motivated, those things that arise in our life does not get in the way of our achieving the very goals that we set out to accomplish. So types of motivation. Some motivators are rewards. Guess what? Another motivator is fear of consequences.
Mhm.
Listen, when I was a child, that was my motivator. I didn't want to get a spanking. So I was trying to be a good girl because I was afraid. And I'm still like that, honey. Listen, I promise you I have an internal conversation. Do I want to do that? Do I want to say that? I play it in my head. Nope, I don't want to do that.
Exactly.
And then another motivator is growth. You want to grow. You want to get
Yes.
to higher heights. You want to evolve into a better version of yourself. Other motivators are power. Some people is motivated for power, and then others are motivated for social reasons. So you guys have to find out what motivates you. and how you can apply self-motivation to being more emotional intelligent. So now we're going to get into social skills, and we're almost done. Social skills are the final piece of emotional intelligence puzzle. These skills are used to influence people's emotions. This is not
Okay.
manipulation. When we say we're influencing people's emotions, I just want to make it clear that we're not manipulating someone, but we're simply influencing their actions or influencing them to take an action. Some influencers are empowerment. When a leader inspires creativity and innovation, they are empowering their employees.
Mm.
Empowerment can be initiated by praising someone or for his or her work. In our household, we can empower our children. We can give them a responsibility, and we can pat them on their back when they did a good job.
Yeah.
We can give them extra things to do. Maybe what we started doing to prepare our sons for the real world is we started letting them pay a bill, not literally with their money, but we would literally have them sit down and make the payment so they can see what the process is like. That empowers, your child when you give them responsibilities. Interpersonal awareness. When you're attentive to a person's concerns, you are exhibiting interpersonal awareness.
Mm.
If you notice someone hesitant to decide or act on something, acknowledging that and giving him or her some form of comfort can change that person's emotion of fear to faith.
Mm.
So, and my sis done that. Candace, whether you know it or not, when we've had conversations and that rejection part of me that used to have power, you know, used to come over me and you would say something encouraging. I'd be like, that's right. And that's because you had interpersonal awareness.
Yeah.
Bargaining, bargaining resources and favors, relationship building, taking time to get to know people is very essential because you spend most of your time, communicating with
Yes.
people, especially in your workplace.
Yes. Yes.
So it's not good to just go to work. I mean, yeah, you want to do a good job, but build some relationships. It's okay to have friends as co-workers. It seems like some people think that's a bad thing. You spend most of your time with them, so you should build relationships with your coworkers.
Yeah.
Logical persuasion. Same thing with your children. Just because you're the adult, you want to build a relationship. Some people think they can't be their child's friend. You can be their friend and their parent. You just got to create boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries. Yes.
Create them boundaries, and when they overstep that boundary, you put them back in the boundary where they need to be.
Yes.
And you do it with emotional intelligence, right?
Yes. Sis. That's
Yeah.
good.
So then lastly, persuasion and coercion. So persuasion is you use facts and data. Some people you can only convince them with facts and data. And sometimes I can be that person. I'll be like, Google. Coercion is and this is what you want to stray away from, using threats to get others to act. You don't want to do that. And then empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand a person's feelings and or their reaction to something. An empathetic response may sound something like this. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. I have never been through that before, but I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yes.
I certainly understand that must be really hard for you.
Mm.
Those are empathetic responses. You're not saying what you feel that you feel their emotion, but you understand their emotion and you're respectful of that experiences that they're having. You're acknowledging that feeling. So for us to exhibit empathy, we must be self-aware. Goes back to self-awareness, right?
Yes.
We must be in tune with our own emotions before we can gain insight into someone else's.
Yes.
Because if we're not in tune with our own self and we're not self-aware, we don't know what's wrong with us. We don't know that when this happens, this trigger happens, we are so irrational that we're not even thinking right. We
Mhm.
don't know that because we had this and that and this happen in our lives, we had these mind filters be created, and they've been grown into our subconscious mind, and we're thinking this way and perceiving things this way, but that's not really reality. Well,
Mm.
when you're not self-aware, you don't know that thing about yourself. But when you become self-aware, you understand those triggers, you understand those emotional parts of you, you
Yeah.
understand those things that are not even good for you. So you can work towards getting them out your system, purging them from your being so that you can be all that you can be.
That's good. That's good.
Three types of empathy is cognitive empathy. And this is when you can detect what a person is thinking. The next one is emotional empathy. And this is when you can discern other people's emotions. And the last one is
Mm.
empathetic concern. And that's when people feel you and care for you genuinely. So those are all of the dimensions of emotional intelligence, and that's how you can apply them and activate them into your families. So that's all that I had for you guys. Like I said, I'm gonna send this over to Candace, and I do have a building emotional competency at the end of this, so you can actually do some work yourselves on your own, answer some questions, and really ponder on some things so you can really activate and become more emotional intelligent. So, Candace, I thank you for this time. It's an honor to do this on your platform, and I hope that you guys really got something out of this information.
Look, I did, more self awareness for me to grow. As we go in new seasons and different stages of life, we always have to readjust. And so,
Hmm.
so it was awesome. So you gave a lot of nuggets, and look, you just gave a free webinar right now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so if you just catching the tail end, please go back and watch the replay. Okay. And yes, and I will definitely upload the file up into my Mom Really group, and we will have a discussion and all of that good stuff. And also, please join her group, 360 Health Movement, right? She's giving a
definitely.
lot of nuggets, and she's getting ready to start a challenge. What is it?
Yes.
Know thyself
Know
challenge, beginning
yourself.
with Monday. So if you're a woman, please join that group. It's awesome. It's awesome. She provides good nuggets, tips, and all of those good things to help remind us on a day-to-day basis to be balanced in our life. And so, Shameka, I love you. I
I
thank
love
you
you
for
too.
coming on the platform and pouring out your heart. You know,
Yes.
and you can tell she's passionate about it. Because we walked and talked for years to birth this right here. And so I'm excited to see her walk in God's calling to another level, the wraparound service for us being whole and healthy Christians. So I love you. I
I
love you.
love
Of
you
course, I'm talking to
too.
you live, but
Yes.
please follow her. Please follow Mom Really. Please follow 360 Health Transformation and inbox her. Is there any, now, do you want to give your social media handle on Instagram or anywhere else, or your email
They're
address?
all at 360 Health Transformations. On Facebook, it's at 360 Health Transformations. And on Instagram, it's at 360 Health
Okay.
Transformations. My website is www.360healthtransformations.com.
All right. Thank you.
You're
Peace and
welcome.
blessings, everyone.
All right. Peace and love.